Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the DFS Hockey Report. It is Monday, November the 3rd. I hope everyone had a fine Halloween weekend. We've got a 4-game slate to start our week off. Starts at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, so sorry for the delay. I had a busy day. Zach had a doctor's appointment that pushed things back a little bit, but Zach, some concern in the chat. Just let the people know that you're doing all right.
I'm totally fine, folks. Doctor's offices just take a little longer sometimes these days.
Canada, baby. That is Canada for you. Let's not get too political, though. Let's get into a nice 4-game slate starting at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. We've got the Toronto Maple Leafs hosting the Pittsburgh Penguins. The St. Louis Blues will host the Ottawa. Oh, my gosh. It's Anthony Solars versus Tristan Jarry, by the way. The St. Louis Blues will host the Edmonton Oilers. Jordan Binnington likely to get the start for the Blues. It's going to be Calvin Pickard for the Edmonton Oilers. Likely going to see UC Saros for the Nashville Predators, who host the Vancouver Canucks, who will likely go with Thatcher Demko. Between the pipes, they will also get Quinn Hughes back tonight. The Blues will get Robert Thomas back to some big names back in the lineups tonight. We've got Joey Daccord likely to get the start for the Seattle Kraken. Arvid Soderblom goes for the Chicago Blackhawks. Those are your 8 starting goalies for tonight's slate. Let's dive right into game number 1, where the Toronto Maple Leafs are minus 176 home favorites, 3.6 implied total, 2.7 for the Pittsburgh Penguins. But despite the low total, the Pittsburgh Penguins do grade out as the number 1 line overall this evening. Hallander's still 5K, Crosby 7,200, Brian Russ 6,500. Despite ranking as our number 1 line overall, the ownership pretty modest on this top line here in Pittsburgh, just 9.4%. A lot of ownership coming in on the Toronto Maple Leafs side of things, 20 and 23% respectively for the second line, which grades out number 1. The top line grades out number 3. So going to be an interesting it's going to be an interesting game here. I have quite a bit of interest in the Toronto Maple Leafs, but at that chalk, it's going to be interesting to kind of navigate that. So we'll break that all down here. Let's start with the matchups where the top line, the Toronto top line, the Matthews, Nyes, Nick Robertson line grades out as the best matchup in this game. They're going to see 47% of their ice time up against that Sidney Crosby line, which that Crosby line, offensive metrics are outstanding. Defensive metrics, not great, but they've actually not given up that many goals, surprisingly, but the defensive metrics really, really bad for them. So then you take a look at the Matthews line, the offensive metrics, again, really, really good. Defensive metrics, not great. So this has the look of what could be a very high event matchup with these two going head to head from nearly 50% of their 5v5 play tonight. Really like the idea of getting behind both of these lines this evening. I think they're in really nice spots. The one thing I'm going to say about the Toronto Maple Leafs, these were their new lines. And I was very interested to see what they were going to do with the new lines once Willie Nylander gets back, because Nick Robertson was the one that was playing on the top line when Nylander was out. Nylander came back, Robertson would go down, but he put back-to-back multi-game performances together in their last 2 games while Nylander was out. So they're actually going to leave Robertson up there with Nylander coming back in on the second line. The issue or concern I have is I'm not really sure how this lineup will ultimately end up looking, because after the morning skate, they were like, okay, so Bobby McMahon's a scratch tonight, obviously, based on the lines this morning. And they were like, well, not 100%. We got some things to figure out. He's not out for sure. So just keep that in mind. Luckily, it's the first game of the night, but if you are targeting Nylander or Robertson or Nyes or Cowan or any of these guys in his top 6, things could look a little different come warm-ups. Hopefully not, though. Make our lives a little bit easier. But let's start with the Pittsburgh Penguins side of things, because like I said, they grade out number 1, 18,700, to full stack the line. The matchup is decent. Like I said, it's 57% of the ice time up against that Matthews line, which, again, they're giving up quite a bit, but not necessarily actually giving up a ton of goals. But this is a matchup where I think Pittsburgh one can take advantage. We know they've played quite well. And then you kind of like, this is going to be maybe the funniest sentence I've ever said on this show, but you take Justin Brazeau out of Pittsburgh too, and are they the same line? I didn't think I'd say that. I still think that Evgeny Malkin is a straw that stirs that drink, obviously, but I don't know if I'm going to get there. Like, Brazeau was doing all the finishing on that line. So I still think, especially with this matchup, not grading out very good at all, I'll probably stick to just Pittsburgh 1, and then I'm going to be really interested in this Maple Leafs top 6. Because as I mentioned, back-to-back multi-point games for Nick Robertson, and he's coming in at just $3,500. And then Easton Cowan is really interesting to me. He's $2,900, and he actually replaced Matthew Nyes on the top power play unit. So that's obviously great. But then the other thing that is just worth noting is Cowan has 15 shot attempts in his last 2 games, 7 of which he got on net, but 15 shot attempts. Now all of a sudden he's playing on the top line, second line with Tavares and Nylander, and top power play unit. That line is ultra intriguing to me. I think I'm going to end up, despite the matchup looking better for Toronto 1, I think I'm going to end up being heavier on Toronto 2. I really like the full correlation on the power play. And then obviously they're just a little bit cheaper as well. So I'm quite interested in that trio. They do grade out with the 7th of 8 ranked power play tonight. The Maple Leafs power play still trying to find its way, also not projected for that many power plays. The Penguins power play has been really good, but projected for the second fewest power plays tonight. But they do have the 3rd best rank. So obviously that top power play unit, Crosby, Rust, they're going to be solid at 5v5, also should be good on the PK, on the power play. So Malkin, Kindell, Rust, Crosby, Carlson. So only real correlation you get is through that top line. So again, just another reason why I'm more heavy on that top line this evening than the rest of this Penguins team. Zach, I was trying to kill as much time as possible. Hopefully you're dialed in here. I think the one thing I want to ask you about, in addition to many things among this game, this third line, Novak, Kindell, Koivunen. I mean, these underlying metrics are simply outstanding. Are you going to get there at all? Like, the matchup's not good, but like from a value standpoint, coming in with no ownership, is that like a value line that interests you a little bit, just given those underlying metrics?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we've talked about playing Tommy Novak in the past when he was with Nashville. I played him a little bit earlier this year. Ben Kindell has been a really interesting guy so far this season. 1.2 goals per hour, 1.2 individual expected goals per hour. He's shooting 15%. That's maybe a little bit high from where it should be, but 7.8 shots on goal per hour. And even Tommy Novak, good volume, 7.4 shots on goal per hour. Koivunen, that was a guy we kind of thought was going to be a bit of a volume hound as well. It hasn't really been there this year. Evidently been up and down, for the American League and the NHL club here. I don't mind them here in this game. I mean, this game feels like it could be absolutely wide open on both sides here. I like this Penguin side as a whole. I think I'm okay getting to a little bit of this Pittsburgh too as well. Brazeau has been, tremendous this season as a finisher, but Anthony Mantha's also got 1.8 goals per hour so far this season. One individual expected goal per hour. Shooting 25%, that's probably a little bit high, but it's always felt like he's kind of been a higher shooting percentage guy. So I don't expect that number to stick for very long, but I don't mind getting there a little bit here tonight. This game just as a whole is fascinating. I love the points you bring up here about this top 6 for the Toronto Maple Leafs. You got some real salary relief options there in Nick Robertson or Easton Cowan, depending on which line you stack. And I also agree with you in terms of, Toronto 2 being a little bit more interesting to me solely because of that power play correlation. It's not the best power play matchup in the world or anything like that here. Pittsburgh shorthanded 3.2 times per game. So, they're going to have some opportunities, and that shot volume from Easton Cowan up there in that top 6. I really like the sounds of that.
Do you want to break down game number 2 where your Edmonton Oilers head to St. Louis?
Boy, do I ever. We got the Edmonton Oilers, a little 2-game road trip here, swinging through St. Louis tonight and through Dallas tomorrow. Oilers coming in as -129 road favorites, 3.3 implied total for them, 2.9 for the St. Louis Blues. Edmonton 1 and 2 grading out very well in the charts here tonight. 4th and 6th best lines to target overall here. Edmonton 1 drawing the better matchup score tonight, 64.5, where it's just a measly 9.7 for that Oilers second line. I kind of like the idea of getting to the Oilers tonight. Big shock. I talked about it a bit last week. I'm basically playing any team that's going up against the St. Louis Blues right now because of how brutal their goaltending has been. Joel Hofer has been awful, and Jordan Binnington has not been much better at all. 9 games played this season, an .860 save percentage, -6.8 goals saved above expected. Oh, yeah, he's got a career .898 save percentage against the Edmonton Oilers with a 2.99 goals against average. I think for that reason, I've got a lot of interest in attacking this Oilers side of things. That top line has been looking good with McDavid and Nugent Hopkins up there. Still waiting for some consistency offensively from Andrew Mangiapane. The shot volume has just not been there this season, which has been a bit disappointing to see. Evidently, the shoulder injury he had a couple of years ago really affected things for him with the Capitals last year, carrying over a little bit so far this season. McDavid and Nugent Hopkins, I think that's a great mini stack. If you want to throw Mangiapane on there as well, I don't mind that. idea either. I just don't think there's a real need to kind of jam him in there. And that's kind of exactly what the public is doing, not only with this Oilers top line and leaving Podkolzin off, but this second, or Mangiapane rather, but this second line for the Oilers as well. Roslovic and Draisaitl have been looking really good together. I thought these line stats would be a little bit stronger for Edmonton too here. It's felt like they've been better than these underlying metrics kind of show, but 3.3 goals for per hour is a really solid clip. Roslovic's up there on that top power play unit right now. He scored a goal there over the weekend. He's really looking like he's starting to fit in well for this Oilers team. And at $3,500, I mean, I think he's just a tremendous value option on this slate here tonight. So no surprises there. I am going to be playing the Edmonton Oilers. You know, the St. Louis side of things, maybe starting to see a little bit more offensively from them here. You know, the offensive scores for their top six have been grading out pretty well here. You know, St. Louis 2, the 8th best line to target, St. Louis 3, 14th, St. Louis 1, 16th. I don't know if there's a huge need to necessarily get there tonight. You know, one thing I will say is Calvin Pickard will get the start for the Oilers tonight. He has been significantly worse than Stuart Skinner has been so far to start this season. So I don't mind the idea of getting to a little bit of this St. Louis side as well. You know, they're really not drawing a whole lot of ownership. And that top line, all things considered, is still really cheap to get to. I mean, what, $13,900 to full stack a top line? I don't mind that whatsoever from a salary relief option. You know, Jimmy Snuggerud continuing to be the one to build around on that top line, which is kind of crazy to say because it's always been, you know, Pavel Buchnevich that's been the guy there. Robert Thomas drawing back in for the Blues tonight. That's undoubtedly going to give them a little bit of a boost here too. This second line, third line, you know, I don't know if I'm going to get there a ton. It kind of feels like this top line might be the one to kind of go after here tonight, especially with Robert Thomas coming back. But I think that second line's a little bit interesting too. You know, Pia Suter, Braden Shen, and Jordan Kyrou. You know, worth noting that both Shen and Suter have center eligibility tonight on the DraftKings slate. So if you are going to be building around them, that's something to kind of keep in mind there. You know, what do you think here, Brock? How are you kind of looking at this game?
Yeah, I was definitely a little bit more interested in Edmonton too, like this morning, before I put the matchups together, and then obviously they look a lot worse than Edmonton won. You know, you've been the one that's really been tooting the Roslovich horn here as of late. And yeah, like the metrics look pretty damn good. Last 6 games, 17 shots on goal, 30 shot attempts. So you're giving me almost 3 shots on goal and 5 shot attempts per game while averaging north of 8, nearly 19 minutes per game playing with Leon Draisaitl. I think that Roslovich, like, there's a couple guys on this slate, right? Like Roslovich, 3,500, Cow and Robertson. Like there's a lot of really nice value up front tonight. Roslovich among my favorites. The shot fly on the floor is probably as good as any sub 4K player on this slate. So really interested in him, despite the matchup not looking great. It might not matter much just because of how bad, like you said, Binnington has been so far this season. So yeah, I'm with you. The Oilers look like they're in a pretty good spot in this one. And then Roslovich, you know, bumped up to that top power play unit as well, right? So if that's something that sticks this evening, just all the more reason to get to him. And we take a look here at that power play matchup for the Oilers. It's the number 2 best power play advantage on the slate tonight. They are a team that has the number 1 ranked power play up against a middling penalty kill. So yeah, lots of reason to like the Oilers in this one for obvious reasons. But you know, on the flip side, this is still an Oilers team that is grading out, you know, pretty well defensively. And the way things have been going for the Blues, I'm not that interested. I will say that, you know, with each passing game, the Oilers seem to be kind of regressing a little bit defensively. And you know what? If they start scoring goals and it comes, you know, at the expense of their defense a little bit, finally, like, just give me some more goals here. So I kind of have interest in the Blues. I just don't really know how to target them. These lines are kind of gross, so I'm probably in agreement with you. Is St. Louis 1 feels like the one that at least I can look at and feel confident in. I don't mind St. Louis 2, like the underlying metrics for them are outstanding. So yeah, I think there's reason to get there with Picard in that. I think for maybe just the sole reason of getting different tonight. They're not drawing much ownership, and I think it's a fun kind of get different spot with Picard between the pipes. And as I mentioned, the Oilers' defensive numbers sort of on the decline at the moment. Any final thoughts on this one before we get to game number 3?
Worth mentioning, the Oilers as power play merchants are starting to return. I like attacking the power play here in this game as well. I mean, it could be a fairly easy power play stack to get to here with, Roslovic only being $3,500, Nugent Hopkins $5,200. I still think you can build some pretty interesting lines around this Oilers power play tonight when we look at some of these other value options on this slate.
Without a doubt. Let's get to game number 3, where I really just never know what to expect from these two hockey clubs. Two of the more difficult teams to project, it seems, and for obvious reasons, right? Like, you take a look at their defensive metrics. We've got Vancouver bottom 5 in terms of expected goals against at 5v5, Nashville 23rd in the NHL. Then you look at it offensively, it's Vancouver second to last, Nashville grading out, where are they? They got to be 22nd. So two bad defensive teams, two bad offensive teams. What kind of ends up being the prevailing factor here with Saros and Demko between the pipes? Obviously injuries to both teams. No Roman Josi on the Nashville side, no Connor Garland among others on the Vancouver side. It's really difficult to pinpoint exactly how things are going to go here. So I lean a little bit more towards this being a lower scoring game. But with that said, I also feel like I'm not going to be shocked at all if this game ends up being 4-3 or 5-4, because I do think, as bad defensively as they are, there's enough talent on both sides of the puck that they can still put the puck in the back of the net. And both of these teams, even with the injuries, have been playing pretty high event hockey in the last couple of, last week or so. So some high scoring games. I don't know really what to make of this Vancouver lineup tonight. I think for me, the charts grade out better for Vancouver 2. I much prefer Vancouver 1. Jake DeBrusk has been a volume hound and just not seeing any rewards at all. I believe he's shooting something like under 6%. Deserves a better fate. I think he's a guy that's underpriced at $4,500. Brock Besser under $5K. I think it's a really nice price tag. And you just got to give this team a bump every single time Quinn Hughes, returns to the lineup. In terms of offensive driving plays, according to our friends at Sports Logic, from the Vancouver Canucks side of things, Quinn Hughes is the top on the team, but also 11th on this entire slate. But Elias Pettersson is 15th. So I think that maybe some of those early season struggles are starting to work themselves out of Pettersson's game a little bit. The shot volume is slowly starting to get better. The first few games not really doing much of anything, but in his last about 6 or 7 games, we've got 33 shot attempts in his last 7 games. So 4.7 shot attempts per game is something that I can buy into a little bit. So Vancouver 1 seems like they're in an interesting spot, pretty underpriced. When we take a look at the matchups here, pretty good on both sides of the puck. So lots of reason to get here. Lots of players in this game doing a good job generating chances and generating shot volume with absolutely little to no success whatsoever. So where is it here? Evander Kane, most shots on goal in the NHL this season without a goal. He is averaging 0.21 expected goals for per game. So he has minus 0.21 goals scored below expected. That is one of the worst marks on this entire slate. One of the players worse than him, Steven Stamkos. Exact same thing. Drawing tons of shot volume, just unable to convert. So that's kind of why I think that this game, while it feels low scoring, has got some sneaky upside. Evander Kane's not going to shoot 0% forever. Jake DeBrusk isn't going to shoot 5% forever. Steven Stamkos isn't going to shoot 3% forever. There's a possibility that they could all, regression hits all at one time here. And I think this game has some sneaky upside. So I'm going to pull up the line stats here to try to navigate it a little bit. The top line for Nashville, by far the best line that they've got. No surprise there. Not really converting as many chances that they're generating. The Vancouver top 6, pretty wishy-washy. But again, The defensive metrics on both sides, pretty ugly. I think there's some sneaky upside. I'm pretty confident in playing the top 6 from both sides here. Howla, Marchessault, Stamkos, really cheap at 11,000. Marchessault's got great shot volume. Stamkos has got great shot volume. Howla's only 2,800. The top line, Forsberg, O'Reilly, Evangelista, not that expensive either. So this game's got sneaky upside to me. I'm kind of interested. I think I'm going to be over the field. How about you?
I agree. It's got some sneaky upside. I don't know if I'm necessarily going to be over the field. I think I'm kind of okay meeting the field here in this game. 12% for Nashville 1 feels fine. 5.6% for Nashville 2 is okay. I do agree that Vancouver 1 is the one that I'm kind of most interested in here, I think, in this game. Pretty solid floors so far this year from Pettersson and Jake DeBrusk. Now, for Pettersson, most of that's kind of coming through block volume. 6.1 block shots per hour of ice time this season. That's a lot for a forward, especially a guy who's a top line center. I think for me, that's kind of the way that I'm looking at this game. I also think there's a reason to have interest in the goaltending in this game too, right? Like if it continues to be 2 volume teams who are struggling to score,
100%.
Demko at 7,600 and Saros at 7,800 look really appealing. 9.4 goals saved above expected this year for Demko, 5.7 for Saros. I think that for me too is why I have just a little bit more interest in this like Vancouver player side here. Just because like Demko has been really, really good this season. He's also had a lot of success against Nashville in his career. 9 games played, he's got 5 wins, a 235 goals against average, and a 922 save percentage. For Saros, 8 wins in 15 games, a shutout, 2.58 goals against average, 908 save percentage. So I do agree. I think it's got some sneaky upside, but I don't know if I'm necessarily willing to be like caught holding the bag being over the field here. I'd rather kind of take a little more risk in some of these other spots tonight.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. Like I said, I think both goalies are good plays too. To me, like if this was not a 4-game slate, this is a game that I would probably pretty easily cross off. But it feels like a good get different spot if things break the right way. But like you said, there's probably a better chance that all these guys just continue to struggle scoring goals than there is all of them breaking out at the same time, right? So I agree completely. But on a 4-game slate, I think I'm a little bit more willing to get different with this one because it does have sneaky upside. But I won't be shocked in the slightest if we return tomorrow. This was a 2-1 hockey game, and I had a horrible night. Before we get to game number 4, Cosmo says, man, I look at Stammer's volume and see some light. Then I see his results, and it's nothing but darkness. I agree. Like, he is getting up there. I don't think, like, we can reasonably expect him to score goals like he used to, but he's not going to shoot 3.3%. Like, that's just almost impossible. So let's get to the final game here, Zach. We got Seattle hosting the Chicago Blackhawks.
Yeah, interesting one here. Seattle coming in as the home favorites, minus 146 on the money line, 3.3 implied total for them, 2.7 for the Chicago Blackhawks. None of these lines are grading out particularly well tonight. Seattle 2 is the best line to target at 11th overall. Chicago 1 right behind 12th overall. Seattle 1 13th. Chicago 2 17th. Very cheap lines across the board here in this game. I think that's a reason to have a little bit of interest. The Seattle side is drawing more ownership, which I kind of do tend to agree with, especially with Arvid Soderblom getting the start here tonight for the Blackhawks. He hasn't been a terrible goaltender this season or anything like that. 1 goal saved above expected, but a 888 save percentage, just 1 win in 3 appearances. He's been terrible against Seattle in his career. 5 games played, 1 win, 5.14 goals against average, and an 835 save percentage. From a matchup perspective, looks great for the Seattle Kraken. Top line a 90.3 score, 100% matchup score for Seattle too. That's some really nice numbers there. When you look at the line stats, not so much. Pretty abysmal numbers offensively for the Seattle side of things. I like this spot tonight for Seattle. I think I'm okay getting there. I don't know if I have a preference per se over one line over the other here. But I think I'm going to kind of meet the field at the ownership here because I like this matchup with Soderblom getting the start. If it was Spencer Knight, I'd probably be off of the Kraken, pretty, not entirely, but I would have significantly less interest. Let's just say that. It's worth mentioning too that Chicago is probably one of, if not the most undisciplined teams in the entire NHL this year. 4.2 times shorthanded per game. That gives the Seattle Kraken the number one matchup score, or number one power play score on the night here. So I think that's an interesting part of this game as well here. Top line for Seattle all has that correlation on the top power play unit. Vince Dunn is the quarterback on power play unit 1. Brandon Montour, quarterback on power play number 2. I think for me, I'm going to have an absolute boatload of Montour this tonight here. Projecting for 24% ownership. Yeah, like I'm probably going to be over the field on him. $5,500 for what he's done so far this season is like just feels ridiculously low. 1.1 goals per hour of ice time. He's obviously shooting the lights out at 15% for a defenseman. 1.8 assists per hour, 7.3 shots on goal per hour, 5.5 blocks per hour. I think he's going to be a near lock for me tonight, especially when you look at the defenseman on this slate tonight. You've only got 2 D-men above $6,500, or let's just say $6,800, and it's Evan Bouchard and Quinn Hughes. Then that next tier is in that like mid to low 5K range. Brandon Montour, Erik Karlsson, Vince Dunn. It's going to be really easy to get to these guys here in lineups tonight. So anything that I'm building Seattle-wise is definitely going to be building through the defenseman as well, with one of Montour or Vince Dunn. The Chicago side of things, I also think they're a little bit interesting here tonight. They're drawing a bit of ownership. Nothing crazy. Chicago too has the most of it, 8.1%, 6.3% for that top line. The matchup scores are definitely tougher here for Chicago, and it makes sense. Seattle's a bit of a stingy team. They like to play low event hockey here. But that top 6 for Chicago, continuing to just shoot the lights out. 3.8 goals per hour for the top line, 2.9 for that second line, both numbers above, the expected goal numbers on the season here. Connor Bedard is looking pretty great to start the season here, evidently boosted by that hat trick last week, but 8.7 shots on goal per hour of ice time. I feel like that's a little bit of an uptick in his volume from last year that we were seeing from him. So that's certainly a good sign. Andre Burakovsky, I think he's the guy to kind of pair with Bedard there from that top line. The second line, I've got some interest in getting there. I've been talking about Frank Nazar, quite a bit this season. His floor has been solid, 7.1 shots on goal per hour of ice time, mixes in a couple of blocks here and there as well. I don't really have any issue getting to this Chicago side of things here tonight, kind of with where the field is at here. It feels like a gross game to kind of target from a DFS perspective, and I can understand why people are kind of staying away from it. But I think, Seattle is interesting because of that power play matchup, especially, maybe not the strongest team at 5-on-5 offensively here, but with just how many penalties Chicago takes, I think it's a really interesting spot to target their power play.
Yeah. Just to your point about the defenseman, we talked about a ton of value up front tonight too. I think it's going to just end up being a really easy pay up night on the blue line. And yeah, Montour seems fantastic since coming back in lineup. He's been really good. I guess like red flags in this game. Seattle dead last in the NHL in expected goals for per 60 at 5v5. It's not even close. 0.4 goals worse than the Vancouver Canucks, who are atrocious. The Blackhawks not much better, 0.2 or 2.65 expected goals for per 60. According to Sports Logic, that's 28th in the NHL. So neither team generating much offensively at 5v5. The one thing going for the Kraken is they still are top 10 defensively in terms of expected goals against. Chicago ranks 19th. So like it's again just 2 bad offenses going head to head and some pretty good defense. Decord's a pretty good goalie. Like I think it's hard for me to have interest in the Blackhawks tonight. I think that I'm probably scratching Chicago 2 off. You've been much higher on them than I have. The metrics to me are just awful. Nazar, I've been, I think he's due to come back down to earth. Like you don't get much of a floor out of Bertuzzi and Teravainen. That line just is overpriced and not really worth it for me, but I do like Chicago 1. To your point about Bedard, I think we talked about him the first 5 games of the season. Like, where's the shot volume at? Was he had like 6 shots in his first 5 games. That has changed drastically. He's over his last 7 games, he's averaging 4.4 shots and 7 shot attempts per game. So definitely making it more of a reason to get the puck on net right now. He's making it a point of that. And it's turned around drastically. So definitely interested there. Pretty good volume from Burakovsky as well. The underlying metrics with Burakovsky and Bedard together have been pretty solid, like 2.8 expected goals for per 60. So I think that line's got the ability to make some noise, at least that mini stack at the very least, maybe including some Sam Rinzel. But yeah, on the Seattle side of things, I think I have more interest there, but I think most of it comes on that top line with Beniers and Eberle. Beniers, not much of a floor to speak of because he doesn't shoot the puck very much, which is pretty unfortunate. But in terms of, again, those offensive driving plays per Sports Logic, he's 9th on tonight's slate. Just to give you an idea, Connor Bedard's 5th as well. So Beniers is a guy that's, at least he's not shooting a lot. He's generating a lot of offense, getting those pucks to the slot, getting the pucks to danger areas and making things happen. And then Jordan Eberle's 19th. And Eberle's shot volume has been really, really good. And as good as Jaden Schwartz has been, he's doing it kind of just on the pure luck. He's shooting like 20%, has an on-ice shooting percentage of like 17%, where Eberle, volume solid. He has 50 shot attempts, almost 5 shot attempts per game. I like that. I think that top line just feels a little bit safer of an option. Tolvanen moving up there, as you mentioned, gives you full correlation on that top power play unit. I think that's great news. So that line interests me more, where I feel like with Stevenson and Kako and those guys, like, you have the chance of getting just zeros from those guys, where I feel a little bit better about Seattle 1. So not to say Seattle 2 is completely off the radar for me. They're only 10,400. Could do much worse than that if you need a salary relief line. But I think more of my interest comes on Seattle 1. I just want to sort here by the power play lines tonight. Is Seattle 1 number 1? Yeah, they're the number 1 power play XG line on the entire slate. So just goes to your point about targeting that Seattle power play tonight. Obviously, if you're playing Seattle 1, you want Vince Dunn. If you're playing Seattle 2, you want Brandon Montour for the power play correlation. Did I sway you at all in any of my points here about the Seattle or the Blackhawks?
Maybe got me a little bit cooler here on the Chicago offense. I do agree with you, and I think one thing worth mentioning too is we talk about Arvid Soderblom in the crease. It's only worth mentioning that Joey Decorda has been solid again this season, not spectacular or anything like that, but in 5 games played against the Blackhawks in his career, he's got 4 wins, a 182 goals against average, and a 930 save percentage. So he's been absolutely nails against Chicago in his career. I could very easily see that continuing tonight, and just as easily see Arvid Soderblom continuing to struggle against the Kraken.
For sure. And just to give you an idea on Chicago, too, their offensive numbers have gotten a little bit better, but still just 2.6 expected goals, and they're scoring at 3.5. So they've been, almost a full goal above expected, 23 scoring chances, under 10 high danger. So still pretty mediocre results overall. Zach, you kind of previewed the defenseman already, so we won't spend too much time here. But again, kind of a pay-up option tonight. Some of the points per 1,000 guys that stand out, you got Tyler Myers, Brandon Montour, Justin Barron, Louis Crevier, Spencer Stastny. I don't know if I'm going to get to many of those guys outside of Montour, if I'm being honest, because it definitely feels like more of a pay up. The two Seattle defenseman grade has the best values overall. Darnell Nurse, as you mentioned a lot, been a volume hound. Quinn Hughes back in the lineup, definitely going to be popular tonight. Wallman volume hound, Ekholm volume hound. I like Justin Falk a little bit tonight, $3,800, good shot volume, top power play unit. I think that's a good spot. I think Evan Bouchard's in a really nice spot tonight too. That St. Louis penalty kill, gonna have trouble with the Oilers tonight. So I'm interested there for sure. The Maple Leafs defensemen are the one where I'm like, I don't really know where to go, right? Like Morgan Riley, I think is okay at 5K. I mentioned Sam Rinzel for the Blackhawks. You got some value here in McCabe and Ekman Larson, especially McCabe if it gets to be a high event game against the Blackhawks. A lot of shot block equity there. Obviously, Chris Tanev back out. It's a lot of minutes to go around. Anybody that stands out to you that we haven't really talked about? Brady Shea still $3,400 playing monster minutes with Roman Yosio.
Yeah, nobody else really that's jumping out in a major way. Like I think Philippe Myers is an interesting minimum price defenseman at $2,500. But I think you covered it off pretty well. It definitely feels like a pay up night on the blue line.
Let's get to the goalies again. All these smaller slates is kind of just like don't stack your skaters against your goalie, you should be all right. Stolarz grades out as the number 1 goal overall. I don't think I'm going to play him much. Like, it has not been very good defensively for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I don't think we talked about that really enough when breaking down that Penguins game. Like, it has been pretty bad for the Maple Leafs blue line and defensively. Stolarz, outside of his last game where he stopped 31 of 33, but that was against the Flyers who can't score. But his last 5 games, 883 save percentage. He's given up 3+ goals in 4 of 5 games. So it's just a team that's struggling defensively, and I think that the Penguins are good enough to take advantage of that. And Stolarz is the third most expensive goalie. Probably not a guy that's going to draw a lot of my ownership. I like Decord. I like that Nashville Vancouver goaltending duo, as you mentioned earlier. Highest owned goalie on the slate tonight is Demko. Probably won't get to Picard much. Probably won't get to Bennington much. Probably won't get to Soderblom much. So you kind of tonight, I feel, just get like pigeonholed into playing Saros and Demko. It's an interesting and weird game. Like, if that game ends up being high scoring, like I said, like this game or this slate's going to be just all over the map. And then Tristan Jarry grades out as the worst goalie, but also seeing the most volume. So I think he's got a lot of chalk busting potential. He's played quite well this year. I think this is a more than winnable game for the Pittsburgh Penguins tonight. And I think that him at like no ownership with the most volume in deep tournaments, Jarry has got a lot of intrigue tonight. But of course, like, it can go wrong. But he has played very, very well. A 923 save percentage, a 235 goals against average, a 67% quality start percentage so far. Like, hasn't really had many bad games, which is very unlike Tristan Jarry, right? Usually it's a roller coaster of emotions with him.
Yeah, totally. But I mean, in the same breath, like, this Pittsburgh Penguins team as a whole, like, I don't think anybody expected them to be, as good as they've been to start the year. An 8-3-2 record to start the season, nobody was expecting that. And one other thing about Jarry, too, beyond just his statistics this season, in his career against the Maple Leafs, 10 games played, 6 wins, a shutout, 276 goals against average, and a 911 save percentage. I'm definitely going to be higher than 5% on Tristan Jarry tonight. I think for me, my ownership in goaltending is pretty much going to be consolidated to 4 guys: Decord, Saros, Demko, and Jarry. I don't really have any interest in playing many other guys here. I might sprinkle in a little bit of Stolarz tonight. I don't like this spot for Calvin Pickard at $8,400. Nor do I like playing Binnington or Soderblom in these spots. So, Decord for me, I think is probably the safest play, probably the cash goaltender tonight. For me at $8,200. But beyond that, like I said, Saros, Demko, Jarry, Decord.
I will say, as bad offensively as Seattle is, I don't think Soderblom is the worst play at that price point. Like, $7,200 against a team that has the worst XG in the league. Like, I think it's just obviously a volume concern potentially there. Like, he's not good. Like, don't get me wrong. I just think, like, you could do worse at there's been worse matchups at $7,200 for sure. Feel like we've slept on Pittsburgh to start. I haven't. I have made so much money on the Pittsburgh Penguins this year. It's unbelievable. I bet them like every single game and they never lose. So, yeah, I hope people keep sleeping on them because you just get great odds on the Penguins almost every night. Tonight, kind of meh. Talked me into Jarry. That should go great. Defenseman for $3,100. Who grades out the best? Tyler Myers, $3K. Adam Larson, always kind of a bit of a volume hound, $3,100. I wish you had the extra 100 because it would be Jake McCabe would be my favorite of the bunch. Anybody that sticks out to you? Brandon Carlo, 3K is not bad. Sorry.
Yeah, no. Good point. Probably would go with Larson or Myers there. Probably lean a little bit more towards the Myers side of things.
And let's get to the hat trick pick challenge. So obviously, because we were late today, pushing things back to tomorrow. So we've got 2 giveaways to do on Tuesday. We had a hat trick last Wednesday. We got to give a prize away, and then we didn't do a show on Friday because it was only a 1-game slate, and I had to take my kid out for Halloween. So we got a giveaway on Friday as well. So tomorrow's show, all you got to do is drop a live chat. You'll be entered to win a $25 gift card to Nation Gear to pick up some DFO swag or some other swag. And then obviously, yeah, we got to raffle one off for Wednesday as well. So that is going to do it. Let's do our hat trick pick challenge. Zach, take it away.
Leon Draisaitl.
I'm going with his line mate. I'm going Jack Roslovich. Addy. I don't know what that will pay tonight, but that shot volume's there. It is possible. You might as well give away 10 prizes tomorrow to cover all your bases. Yeah, just preemptively hand them out. I like that. TE says, Stamkos, Hattie, love the pick, but you have to drop it. I don't think I said this for sure, but you have to drop it in the comment section of the video on YouTube, not the live chat, just so it's easier for me to go back and see who picked it. So drop it in the comment section of the video, not the live chat, please, and thank you. Before we go, shout out to our friends at rotogrinders.com for providing projected ownership for today's show. If you want to get $20 off your first month of RotoGrinders Premium, it's absolutely spectacular. You can do so by clicking the link in the description of the video on YouTube. We also have 20% off Action Network Premium if you want to up your betting game. Bet on the Pittsburgh Penguins every night. 20% off of Action Network. And then we also have the link to the DFO DFS Discord, which is where these charts get posted. So if you want to access these charts after the show, join the Discord. They are in there. You can access them right away. And that is going to do it. We have a nice slate of games this week. It's nice and balanced. We don't have any 16 gamers. We got a 10 gamer tomorrow, which is lovely. 5 on Wednesday, 9 on Thursday, 4 on Friday. Going to be a beautiful week here at the DFO DFS Hockey Report. We will definitely be live earlier tomorrow. No doctor's appointments scheduled today or tomorrow, excuse me. So we will see you guys back here tomorrow. Jorge, before we go, says, why are the Sharks so good? Lost to the Red Wings last night, so not that good. But they're back, baby. Zach, before we go, like this sports weekend, like I hope like just every favorite wins, nice and chill. Like we need just like to mellow out for a minute. Like the World Series was insanity. Insanity. I don't want to get too into it because you'll cry and I don't want to bring up any tears on the show. But the World Series was insanity. The NHL, we had like the Sharks beating the Avalanche. There was upsets left and right. And then NFL Sunday was just absolutely bananas yesterday. So maybe that's why the Canucks and Predators are scoring like 14 goals tonight. It's just we're living in a weird world right now.
Yeah, I think if there was any proof of the simulation being real, it'd be a big offensive night between Nashville and Vancouver. Yeah, man, that was a wild sports weekend. Heartbreaking for the Jays. I mean, just I'm at a loss for words still, to be totally honest, because there was so many moments where it felt like they had it within their grasp and they kind of just let it slip away. Also kind of ironic that, you know, the Jays giving up a bunch of homers is what sunk them this season, considering that was one of their major flaws during the regular season. You know, huge day for my Chicago Bears yesterday, which was great to see. Caleb Williams.
That was insane.
Oh man, finally coming on as an NFL quarterback, which is great to see. Yeah, tons of fun had this weekend in the sports world. So, and it looks like you said, man, another great week of sports here coming up. So, obviously no more World Series or anything like that, but these are some pretty nice NHL slates and some good NFL games coming up here too, for sure.
Absolutely. Cheers to everybody watching. Smash the like button, hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Until tomorrow, we say cheers.
Cheers.